Welcome to Wide Angle. Today, to discuss the implications of President Obama's recent visit to Asia, we have a very distinguished panel. Ambassador Tyal, who has served in the region, Dr. Rajeshwari Rajgopalan, Senior Fellow of the ORF, and Professor Mahapatra from JNU, who has been working on US policy in the region for a long time. Welcome. Let me start with you, Professor Mahapatra. It was more than 2 years ago that US announced its strategic pivot to Asia, and now it is sometimes described as the rebalancing towards Asia. President Obama's visit, which was supposed to have taken place last year but got postponed for a number of domestic reasons, was therefore a long-awaited visit. How do you evaluate the visit in terms of the strategic rebalancing?
This visit is extremely important in terms of strategic rebalancing in Asia. It was way back in November 2011 that Hillary Clinton wrote an article, and in writing articulated the need for a new pivot to Asia strategy of the United States. Subsequently, President Barack Obama visited Canberra, and when he was talking to the parliamentarians in Australian Parliament, he used the term for the first time, pivot to Asia. It created a lot of problem in Europe, in the Middle East, even in Asia. The Europeans thought that pivot to Asia means they are marginalizing Europe. And the leaders in Middle East, they thought that the moment the Americans are going to pivot to Asia, that means they are going to completely ignore the region, run away from Afghanistan, and talk more and more about Asia Pacific. But the countries in the Asia Pacific, they thought that America is saying this, but nothing is done in action. So in this context of suspicion within the region that Obama does not mean what he says and is not implementing his stated policy, this visit is extremely important. More particularly because the Chinese flexing of military muscle soon after the announcement of the pivot to Asia. The Chinese thought it is a clear-cut case of containment of China. And then the US thought that in view of this kind of interpretations in different parts of the world, it is better to change the term pivot to rebalancing and convince the Chinese that our policy is not containment of China. Even China will be co-opted subsequently because we want to have a comprehensive economic partnership with China as well. And as you very correctly pointed out, sir, October last year, Obama could not visit because of domestic politics. Now, unless Obama really goes in person and says that I am going to reassure my allies and my policy of pivot to Asia is in place in spite of the defense budget cut and in spite of military downsizing, then the whole policy of shifting towards Asia, which is important for American economy, American national security, would fall apart. That is why I say this is a very important trip.
Now, he started with Japan, went on to South Korea, and then visited Malaysia and ended up in the Philippines. Now, 3 of these 4 countries, namely Japan, South Korea, and Philippines, are countries which have formal treaty arrangements, security treaty arrangements with the United States. And as you said, these countries have been facing a more assertive Chinese policy, particularly with regard to East China Seas and South China Seas. So let's take them one by one. East China Seas. Maybe I can turn to you, Ambassador Tyal, and ask you about, we have seen last year a certain amount of tension over the Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands, as the Chinese call them, between Japan and China. What is the kind of message that President Obama was conveying during his visit to Tokyo?
A very major objective of the President Obama's visit was to give security assurances to its allies, and you named 3, and also to reposition or reassert that that against China, United States remains the main balancer as far as that part of Asia is concerned. Now there has been ADIZ, and there have been some moves by China.
Well, for the benefit of our viewers, the ADIZ, which was announced by China last year, was the Air Defense Identification Zone. But then the ADIZ was not implemented very strictly by the Chinese.
But it was challenged by both United States, even Republic of Korea, and Japan. Now, the biggest outcome of this visit has been that President Obama has very publicly asserted that as far as Senkaku, Diaoyu Islands are concerned, since they are in the possession, physical possession of Japan, they are covered by the US-Japan Security Treaty, and that will have a very major impact in the security situation of the region, and the Chinese have already reacted to it and have said in some commentaries that the US has declared that China is their adversary. Now, as far as Japan and Korea are concerned, these are two very major allies of United States, but unfortunately they are not very friendly at this period of time.
We will come to that in a moment, but let me just ask Professor Rajgopalan, in terms of the fact that US position has traditionally been that while it does not take a position on the sovereignty question of the disputed islands or disputed waters, it opposes use of force to resolve these issues. Now, how did President Obama's formulation in Japan, did it go beyond this traditionally stated position? Was it a step forward?
I think you rightly pointed out that there's not been much of a shift in a sense when you look at the US positioning on the Senkaku Islands or even beyond in other territorial disputes in Asia. But I think what the visit itself has been a measure to reassure the allies, because in the last 2 years, when you look at some of the commentaries, some of the statements from the US State Department and so on and so forth, you do see that they have been trying to make it a clarification there, saying that US-Japan alliance is there. We do cover these issues under the territorial issues under the US-Japan Defense Treaty, but we don't want to get into the middle of the conflict itself and take a position on this. So that has created a lot of wariness within the Japanese in the domestic circle, as well as in other countries as well, in South Korea as well. On a lot of other issues, generally about the credibility of the US as a security guarantor in a sense. So in that sense, the statement made by President Obama is in a sense to clarify some bit of and give a bit of reassurance that we are there, we stand by the
yes, but as Ambassador Tayal said, where he went forward was by invoking the bilateral security agreement,
Defense Treaty agreement
in his public articulation, which was perhaps seen as a sense of or as a sign of reassurance.
Absolutely, that's right.
Let me come back to the point you were making about the tensions in recent times between the two critical allies in the region, namely Japan and South Korea. And if I remember right, South Korea is often described as the linchpin of security strategy, and Japan is described as the cornerstone of security strategy. Now, it's very difficult to judge as to which one is more important or significant, but nonetheless, President Obama did some effort in trying to repair or in trying to address the strains that have emerged in between the two countries, and perhaps you could throw some light as to why have these strains been evident in recent months.
Indications are that as the tensions between Republic of Korea and Japan are rising because of the memories of the colonization period, because of what happened during the war period, and comfort women issue, etc., where Koreans feel that there should be more which Japanese should do, and Japanese feel that they have done enough.
But Japan had formally apologized in 1993 on this issue.
They had apologized, but still there are some issues which Koreans feel there has not been a closure. And a couple of years back, the Korean Constitutional Code has reopened the issue as far as the comfort women is concerned. So it is very much part of the public debate in Korea, and that's why now you would have seen that President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Abe have really not had a bilateral meeting.
Except in The Hague.
But it was a trilateral meeting.
Yes, it was sponsored in a sense by President
Obama. And called by President Obama, and not much came out of it. So this is a very big issue before President Obama, how to bring these two allies together. But on this point, let me make one more point, that Republic of Korea seems to be drifting gradually towards China, because of the economic engagement is getting very, very strong, and the Republic of Korea-China trade is equal to the Republic of Korea Japan trade and Republic of Korea United States put together. And the prevailing sentiment in Republic of Korea is that China is not their adversary or enemy, their adversary or enemy is North Korea. And to manage North Korea, they need both the American muscle by way of 29,000 soldiers who are there and the goodwill of China, which is the only country which can restrain North Korea.
Well, North Korea, there were reports that perhaps North Korea was going to undertake another nuclear test on the eve of the Obama visit, but then the test did not take place. But nonetheless, it is true that North Korea has conducted 3 nuclear tests. It has an active missile program, which is often seen as threatening by both South Korea as well as Japan. So, what is the kind of message that President Obama was carrying on the North Korea issue to South Korean president in his talks with the South Korean president?
It is more verbal because North Korea has repeatedly defied the public opinion, the global opinion, the world opinion, even Chinese reservations, and has repeatedly gone ahead with 3 tests. So, even if they have another test, what can the world do? So, it is more a verbal assurance rather than any promise of something more definite, tangible, which will have a real outcome.
Dr. Rajagopalan, do you think China can bring its influence to bear on North Korea on these critical issues of nuclear and missile proliferation?
I don't think we have seen much of a result by way of Chinese intervention in the case of, because I believe that China has a significant influence, because China remains the only country that is engaged with North Korea in a significant manner, whether it is in political kind of support, political and moral support, as well as the economic engagement, whatever trade or whatever in terms of such kind of interactions, it has been the Chinese. So they are the only ones who have any sort of leverage with the North Koreans, but the United States or any other power, none of the powers have been able to kind of bring on that influence on China to take serious action, to get China to get serious action against North Korea. So that's a serious problem. In that sense, I would kind of look at also the Japanese wariness, because North Korea walked out of the NPT, gave the notice and did that. They have conducted nuclear tests. They have gone about with their missile proliferation further and with their own development in that regard. But what has the international community done in that sense? And there is a strong amount of wariness, apprehension in Japan, particularly about what does this mean for them, and how is their security going to be beefed up?
We will come back to the Japanese security concerns and their rising defense expenditure just after the short break.